You scumbag subcontractor. The offensive remarks spoken about my son made me frown. The speaker, a department head at a maker of machine parts, obviously denigrated M's business, a subcontractor. Speaking to a bank staffer, he sneered and lightly tapped my son's head, saying, "Oh, this our company slave." Despite being treated so badly, my kid remained silent, maybe out of respect for the primary contractor. However, I couldn't stand by and watch such rudeness. Having someone who only knows how to use their position to denigrate others as a department head raises severe concerns about the caliber of the entire organization. I started talking gently, keeping it in mind. You can call me Jack Nicholson. I have a reasonably active life as the president of Nicholson Electric, an appliance manufacturer. However, there was nothing planned for today, making it an unusual day off. I was reading the newspaper and enjoying a cup of coffee in the living room when my phone rang, thinking it could be good to spend a day at home for once. My second kid, Kyle, was the name that was shown. "Good morning, Kyle. What's going on?" "Good morning, Dad. Would you like to go out to dinner with me after I visit the bank today to discuss the loan?" I grinned and took a drink of coffee. "Yes. Let's get together at the bank. I'll be in the lobby waiting for you." "I got it. I'll email the time to you." When Kyle heard my answer, his voice sounded pleased. It's difficult not to relax the purse strings when he smiles like that. Being the youngest, he has, to be honest, always figured out how to obtain what he wants. Kyle was an engineer at our company once. At Nicholson Electric, he solved several technological problems thanks to his extraordinary talent. I was proud of his persistent desire to take on new technological difficulties as I saw him develop. After years of courtship, Kyle eventually wed his childhood pal. Kyle decided to become an adopted son-in-law because she was the sole daughter of a company president. In order to assume her father's position as heir at Wilson Manufacturing, Kyle quit Nicholson Electric. But his father-in-law, Edward Wilson, unexpectedly died just before he was set to begin his studies. All of a sudden, Kyle had to handle every aspect of managing the company. Kyle was a former engineer with minimal experience in management. Nevertheless, he put in a lot of effort to safeguard the abandoned business. When we first met, he frequently had black circles under his eyes, indicating that he was having trouble with the new task of administration. I wanted to help him as his father and a fellow entrepreneur. I frequently gave suggestions to Kyle when he was looking over documents late into the night, and occasionally we stayed up together to brainstorm improved ideas. Kyle took my advice seriously and made an effort to put it all into practice. Wilson Manufacturing's performance consequently improved over time. Kyle became a successful company leader as a result of his hard work. After all this time, I was really looking forward to spending some time with him as a father and son. So that afternoon, I changed into casual clothes and left the house. Usually, I'm dressed in a sharp suit, but today I'm just a father, not a business owner, so something simple would do. When I arrived at the bank, the lobby had a calm and quiet atmosphere. "Sorry, Dad, the previous customer is taking longer than expected, so I haven't been able to consult with them yet." I found Kyle sitting on the waiting area sofa and approached him. When he noticed me, he spoke with a slightly apologetic tone. "It's no problem. I'll just wait here, so don't worry about it." "Thanks, but somehow having you nearby makes me nervous." "What are you talking about?" At this point, I said with a bit of exasperation, and Kyle smiled warmly. As Kyle and I sat side by side in the waiting area, a few men came out of a private room. One of them spotted Kyle and approached with a nasty grin. The man's face looked familiar, but I couldn't recall his name. Who on earth could he be? As I was sifting through my memories, the man sneered and began to speak to Kyle. "Hey, you low-life subcontractor." Kyle frowned for a moment at his attitude, but quickly stood up and greeted him politely. "Good afternoon, Shan." When I heard the name Sean, it suddenly clicked. He was Sean Meth, the head of the manufacturing department at Wilson Manufacturing's main contractor, a machine parts manufacturer. I must have remembered him because we had met before. What brings you here? Are you here to apologize for a delay or something? No, I'm here to discuss a loan today. Don't pretend you're fine. Your company is in serious trouble, isn't it? Even though Kyle responded calmly, Sean continued to mock him without really listening. Excuse me. At that moment, the loan officer from the bank, who had come out of the room with Sean, hesitantly spoke up. Seeing this, Sean seemed to think the officer wanted an introduction. Oh, this our company's slave, Sean said, tapping Kyle on the head. Perhaps out of respect for the main contractor, Kyle remained quiet despite this rudeness. Taking advantage of this, Sean continued to speak with even more contempt. For a small company like yours to be here, you must be here to beg for money, right? The rude words from Sean filled me with intense anger. What is wrong with this guy? I was close to losing my temper before Kyle did. Meanwhile, Kyle remained calm, letting Sean's words pass without losing his composure. I couldn't help but admire his calm demeanor. Kyle used to be much more impulsive, quick to anger. In the past, he got into fights at school several times, and I was often called in to give him a lecture. Even when he first started working, he often let his emotions get the better of him on the job. There were many times when he got heated during negotiations or caused trouble on the work site. But the Kyle standing before me now seemed like a completely different person. He had learned to control his anger and gained the ability to calmly assess situations. As his father, I was incredibly proud. However, from Sean's perspective, Kyle's calmness only seemed to provoke his irritation. Sean glared at Kyle, sneered, and said, "What's with that attitude? Show some gratitude. Subcontractors like you can't survive without us. Of course, we're grateful for our daily business relationships. That's not coming through. Subcontractors should behave accordingly and brown nose and be aware that you rely on us completely." What a terrible thing to say. The contrast between Kyle's composure and Scene's arrogance only heightened the tension in the room. I couldn't help but question Scene's suitability as a professional in any business setting. Or maybe it's more like he lacks basic manners and a sense of ethics. Does he normally behave so arrogantly towards subcontractors? If that's the case, it's a serious problem. He only knows how to look down on others by using his position. Having someone like him working as a department head raises concerns about the overall quality of the entire company. With that thought, I finally decided to speak up. "Excuse me, can I have a word?" When I called out to Scene, he looked at me with a puzzled expression. "Does your company approve of treating subcontractors like that?" When I asked this, Scene scoffed, looking down on me. "Huh. Who the hell are you? This is none of your business." "Do you really think so?" I slowly stood up and looked Scene straight in the eye as I spoke. Scene took a step back, appearing slightly intimidated. I continued speaking to him. "Let me put it this way. The $30 million contract for the new product release next year, which was planned with your company, is now canceled." The room fell silent for a moment at my words. Scene looked stunned for a moment, but then he burst out laughing loudly. "Hey, who is this old man, Kyle? Is this guy someone you know?" When Scene asked this with a laugh, Kyle answered with a straight gaze. "He's my father." At this, Scene laughed even more in a crude manner. "You brought your senile old man here to try and get sympathy, huh?" Hearing this, Kyle, who had remained calm until now, glared at Scene with a look of anger. At that moment, the loan officer began whispering nervously into Scene's ear. What about that old geezer?" Scene listened to the loan officer with a dissatisfied expression, but gradually the color drained from his face. His expression quickly changed to one of shock and panic. The president of Nicholson Electric, this old geezer. It seemed he finally understood the situation. I nodded quietly at Scene's words. Seeing this, Scene started to tremble. It was no wonder he was shaken. My company, Nicholson Electric, places large orders for parts from Scene's company. The work that Scene's company passes on to Wilson Manufacturing ultimately involves producing parts ordered by Nicholson Electric. Scene stood there in a daze for a while, but then his face turned pale, and he began to sweat as he desperately apologized. I deeply apologize. I didn't realize you were Jack. I'm terribly sorry for my rudeness. You didn't realize? The loan officer here recognized me immediately. And I'm pretty sure we met just recently during the contract negotiations. Sheen had indeed attended the meeting regarding the $30 million contract I had mentioned earlier. Well, you see, since you're in casual clothes, I didn't recognize you. And with work being so hectic lately, I haven't been thinking straight. If I weren't the president, would you have continued that attitude? In other words, you're an insincere man who changes his behavior based on who you're dealing with. Sheen's face turned even paler as he bitterly shouted at Kyle. Hey, what's going on here? You said he was your father, but the last names don't match. I took my wife's last name when I married into the Wilson family. I used to be Kyle Nicholson. How was I supposed to know that? Why didn't you tell me your father is Jack? And you call yourself a subcontractor when you can't even share basic information. Whether he's my son or not is irrelevant here, Scene. What we're discussing is your lack of morals. When I said this, Scene desperately tried to make excuses. No. It was just a little joke earlier. There are some things that can't be dismissed as jokes, especially in a business setting. Listening to Scene's feeble excuses, I continued in an even calmer voice. I can't trust someone who makes such tasteless jokes, and without trust, it's difficult to maintain any contract. Do you understand what I'm saying? What exactly do you mean? What I'm saying is that after today's incident, we'll have to reconsider our business relationship with your company. I heard Scene gasp as he took in my words. Ignoring his reaction, I continued speaking. It's difficult to build a relationship of trust with a company that treats its subcontractors like slaves. Tomorrow, we'll officially notify you of the contract termination. I delivered these words clearly and without hesitation. Kyle looked at me with admiration in his eyes, a faint smile playing on his lips. That's my dad, Kyle murmured softly. Meanwhile, Scene, now as pale as a sheep, pleaded with me, almost in tears. Jack, please reconsider. My words were misunderstood. Please forgive me. I gave Scene a cold stare. Misunderstood. What exactly was misunderstood? I saw everything with my own eyes and made my judgment accordingly. I cannot trust a company that values people like you. As I said this, despair spread across Scene's face, and he stood there unable to utter another word. Then, as if trying to save face, he began to speak, his voice trembling. Are you sure you should say that? What do you mean by that? If we cut off orders to your son's company, he won't be able to repay his loans, let alone get additional funding, right? Sheen sneered as he pointed at Kyle. Kyle, who had been pointed at, just shrugged with a troubled expression. Seeing this, Scene couldn't hide his irritation and raised his voice. Hey, why don't you say something? Well, how should I put this? You don't need to worry about the loan repayment. We'll be finished with it soon. Really? But you're still trying to get a loan, right? Doesn't that mean you're struggling with cash flow? Actually, at that moment, the loan officer, looking flustered, interrupted. The loan is something we're requesting from Wilson Manufacturing. Scene looked confused for a moment, hearing the loan officer's panicked tone. What do you mean by that? The performance of Wilson Manufacturing has been excellent, and there's no risk of a cash shortfall. Since Kyle took over as president, the company's performance has improved, and in recent years, it's been recording record profits annually. John was left speechless by the loan officer's words. Indeed, when Kyle first inherited Wilson Manufacturing, the company was on a downward trend, just as Sean had said. It was like a sinking ship, and many employees were undoubtedly worried. But Kyle faced the situation head-on. He threw all of his expertise as an engineer into turning the company around. He thoroughly reviewed the manufacturing processes to improve efficiency, introduced new technology to upgrade the old equipment, and significantly improve the quality of their products, thereby elevating the technical standards of Wilson Manufacturing. Moreover, Kyle sought advice from me, his father. I taught him about business strategy, market analysis, and the importance of risk management. Kyle absorbed this knowledge and put it into practice. The combination of Kyle's technical expertise and my business advice led to Wilson Manufacturing's steady recovery. And as the loan officer mentioned, the company has been recording record profits every year. We're set to fully repay our loan in about a month, but the bank suggested an additional loan, so I'm here to discuss that today. You mean the bank suggested it? Yes. I was considering expanding our production line, so I thought it was a good idea. John stood there in stunned silence at Kyle's words. A bank proposing a loan is the clearest indication that the company is in good financial health. Banks don't lend money without confidence in repayment. I could see Sean's face twist in shock and panic as he finally grasped the situation. No way. You're really that confident? It's the result of my experience at Nicholson Electric and my father's advice. But most of all, it's the result of the hard work of all our employees. Kyle said this with a confident smile. At that moment, the bank branch manager hurriedly approached us. My apologies for the delay, Kyle. The branch manager didn't even glance at Sean and came straight over to Kyle and me, continuously apologizing. Watching this, I could see the blood drain further from Sean's face. He clearly hadn't imagined that the person he had been looking down on was someone worthy of such respect. It was as if I could hear the sound of something deeply ingrained in him crumbling to pieces. I'm glad I made it in time. I'd like to join the discussion, if that's all right. Of course. We appreciate your input. I've been hearing a lot about the success of Wilson Manufacturing. We're eager to proceed positively with the additional loan. The branch manager began speaking enthusiastically, signaling to the loan officer. The loan officer immediately responded by leading Kyle and me to a private room. Oh boy, I was just planning to have a meal as a regular dad today. Come on, Dad. Don't say that. I wanted to hear your advice too. Well, I suppose I don't have much of a choice this way, Kyle. With the branch manager guiding us, we entered the private room. As I glanced sideways at Sean, I saw him standing there dumbfounded, left behind. The next day, before I could send notice of the contract termination, I received a call from Sean's company. It seemed their president wanted to apologize in person, so Kyle and I arranged the meeting. As soon as we met, the president apologized deeply for Sean's misconduct. We deeply apologize for this situation. We also find Sean's behavior highly regrettable for our company. Jack, could you possibly reconsider canceling the contract? The president pleaded earnestly, and I calmly responded. If that's the case, I would like you to conduct an internal investigation to see if he has treated other subcontractors in the same manner. And if there is such evidence, take appropriate action. If you do, I will reconsider canceling the contract. The president readily agreed to my request and promised to conduct the internal investigation promptly. As a result of the investigation, it was revealed that Sean had displayed the same arrogant behavior toward multiple subcontractors and had even demanded personal kickbacks. Furthermore, he forced weaker subcontractors to align their stories and expensed his personal dining as guest company costs. Given the severity of these actions, Sean was immediately dismissed for cause. Additionally, the legal department began taking steps to address the kickback issue. After receiving this report, I, as the president of Nicholson Electric, informed them that I would withdraw the contract termination. This should restore normal relations between them and Wilson Manufacturing. Let's hope so. Reflecting on the events, I couldn't help but feel proud of Kyle's growth. Despite being treated so disrespectfully, Kyle remained calm and composed throughout, He truly has the qualities of a president. I hadn't realized just how much he had matured. I used to worry about his hot-headed, impulsive nature when he was younger. But now, his growth is astonishing. Thinking that, I decided to express my feelings to Kyle. Kyle, you've really become someone to be proud of. Huh. Where is that coming from all of a sudden? No, I just couldn't help but think that after everything that happened. Thanks, but it's all thanks to what you taught me. A company leader must always stay calm. Remember when you told me that long ago? Yes, I remember. But honestly, I still have a long way to go. Seeing the way you handled things recently really drove that home for me. So please, let me continue learning from you. Kyle said this with a serious expression, looking straight at me. What words could be more gratifying for a father? Hearing Kyle's words brought a wave of emotion to my chest. I see. Then let's continue growing together from here on. As I wiped away a tear forming at the corner of my eye, Kyle smiled warmly. His smile conveyed deep trust and respect. Thank you, Dad. I'll be counting on you. Of course. I can't afford to fall behind either. As long as you keep growing, I'll have to keep working hard too. I answered with heartfelt resolve. As a parent and as a business leader, I couldn't be more excited about the future I would share with Kyle. With a playful tone, Kyle then suggested, "How about we exchange ideas over another meal sometime? On your tab, of course. Hey, I've been paying all the time. It's about time you treat me, Mr. President." As I celebrated Kyle's growth, I also found myself reinvigorated for the challenges ahead. Our bond grew even stronger, and together, we took a new step toward the future of our respective companies. Get lost, you idiot. Tony Walker erupted into a fury and threw a chair at me, his face flushed red. He pointed at me and started laughing as he saw me tremble with astonishment and dread. Tony is parading around looking very powerful. He is the head of the sales promotion department for a large fast food chain subsidiary. Executives and senior staff from the entire group are present at the company's year-end celebration in addition to the main office workforce. To the best of my knowledge, Tony's assertions that he has ties to the CEO are a bunch of bullshit. Everyone at the party is shocked by his outburst. However, he continues to insult me in spite of the cold environment. My wife M came out against Tony at that very moment because she could no longer watch in silence. Though unfazed by Emily's audacious demeanor, Tony was stunned when a second figure emerged. He paled his face, which had been flushed with pride. Finally, Tony, who had been acting egotistical and riding high, faced his match. He paid a heavy price for what he did. However, Tony appeared to be involved in something far more significant. Magnus Walker is my name. I tend to agree with those who tell me it's a strange name. Since I was a young child, I've felt as though it overshadows me. My life has been fairly normal, even with such a fancy name. My life is excellent, yet I'm busy every day because I'm 38 and in the prime of my career. Things are going well because I have a wonderful wife and we recently had a son. Maximus, which translates to the greatest, is the name we gave our son in honor of my own name. I can still picture my wife, Emily's shocked expression when I told her the name I had thought of. I wanted him to grow up big and strong, which is why I chose the name. However, I worry if, like me, he will eventually feel that his name is too much for him. Perhaps my parents are the source of my talent for naming things. I am employed at a large fast food company. My decision to pursue this career was heavily influenced by my parents. They always state that they are thrilled when they see people smile after a delicious dinner, and they love to cook. Like them, nothing makes me happier than watching folks go with smiles on their faces and full bellies. We're going to open a new location in a big mall, and the business is doing great. This time, however, the business is run by a group subsidiary rather than being directly owned. I went to check it out since I had the day off, and I was taken aback by how crowded it was. I was reassured that there was nothing to be concerned about by the first day's crowds. Abruptly, though, I heard a voice shouting from the rear of the shop. "How is it that you can't understand anything so basic? Are you attempting to destroy this place?" The shouts startled more people than just me. Every customer inside turned to face the voice as well. At that moment, a young woman who appeared to be an employee fled in tears. I peered into the staff area out of concern that anything might be amiss, but a large man gave me a harsh glance. "What's your problem? This isn't a freak show. Get out." The guy, who had taken off his jacket but was still in a suit, was clearly an employee, but he wasn't acting like someone who should be dealing with customers. Annoyed by his intimidating attitude, I tried to stand my ground. "Aren't you an employee? Don't you think that attitude is a little off?" The guy sneered at me, lightly snorted through his nose, then laughed and went off. The rest of the day went by without any major issues, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. So I went back to the office to look into who that guy was. According to the employee records, his name is Tony Walker, and he's the head of the sales promotion department. His department doesn't usually have much to do with the actual stores, but it seems he was brought in for this event to help with the promotional activities for the new store. But there's no way that kind of customer service attitude is acceptable for someone working in this group. I decided to visit the store again on the final day of the opening campaign, and it was still bustling with customers. The store operations seemed to be going smoothly, but that wasn't what I was there to check. Sure enough, there was Tony at the register, looking annoyed and doing nothing to help anyone. He just stood there looking bored while the rest of the staff were clearly struggling to keep up with the crowd. I couldn't stand it any longer and spoke up. "Hey, a customer's here. Someone help them. Is this place full of useless people or what?" Even though the store was in chaos, Tony still didn't make a move to help. "Aren't the other employees busy? Shouldn't you be helping them?" I asked in disbelief. Tony clicked his tongue and then said something unbelievable. "Can't you see we're busy? If you're just here to mess around, get lost." Not only did Tony treat me like a nuisance, but he also looked around to make sure no one was watching before forcefully shoving me out of the store. And as I stumbled and fell, Tony deliberately extended a hand to help me up. "Oh, are you okay, sir?" With a half smile on his face, Tony rushed over, making it look like I had just tripped on my own. I could hear the snickers around me. Unable to bear the cold stares from those around me, my face turned bright red with embarrassment, and I quickly ran away from the scene. A month after that humiliating incident, due to certain circumstances, I was transferred to a subsidiary within the group, and wouldn't you know it, I was placed in the same sales promotion department where Tony works. My job was to investigate why sales were declining, but I was pretty sure Tony was the reason. On my first day, I was shocked beyond words. "So you're the guy they sent over, huh? You've got a real broke look about you. You better be useful to me." Tony assumed I was just some temp worker and looked down on me without even bothering to ask my name. Looking around, I noticed that all the employees in the department had pale faces, and the overall work efficiency seemed really low. The biggest problem was during the planning meetings. Everyone seemed to be tiptoeing around Tony and didn't dare speak up. The whole atmosphere was so strange that I couldn't help but feel uneasy. So I started asking the employees what was going on, but no one would say anything. They just looked scared. A new employee transferred in after me, but they always seemed anxious and showed no enthusiasm for the job. I couldn't just leave things as they were in this lifeless workplace. Having reached my limit, I decided to confront Tony directly, though I tried to be tactful about it. "Tony, I think it'd be better if you took the employees' opinions into account more." "Who are you again?" Whatever. More importantly, are you stupid for thinking somebody like you could tell me what to do?" Tony didn't even bother to remember my name and was convinced that his opinion was the only one that mattered. There was no point in trying to reason with him. If anything, he retaliated by piling a mountain of pointless work on my desk. Some of the documents had nothing to do with my job, but all he said was, "Just do it." I ended up working overtime every day, losing the energy to even talk back, and eventually became mentally and physically exhausted. As the year-end approached, there were only a few days left until the big annual year-end party. This event was a grand affair every year, not just with employees from the main office, but also executives and senior staff from all the group companies. Although I was currently working at a subsidiary, I was technically still part of the main office, so I had to attend. Tony, being in a managerial position, would probably attend as well. I knew it would be troublesome if I ran into him at the party, but I couldn't skip it due to my position. I figured if I got the chance, I'd expose Tony's bad behavior in front of the main office execs. But I knew that when faced with Tony himself, I'd probably lose my nerve and not be able to say anything. On the day of the big year-end party, I was feeling nervous and tried to stay out of sight, hanging out on the sidelines. When I ran out of my drink and headed to the bar, I accidentally bumped into Tony. "Hey, aren't you just a lowly temp? What are you doing here?" Tony was already visibly drunk, his face flushed red. I was told to attend the party. So, this isn't the kind of place where a loser like you can just show up. No matter how I tried to explain why I was there, the drunk Tony wouldn't listen and just kept treating me like dirt. As I sighed in frustration, Tony suddenly grabbed me by the collar, bringing his booze-smelling face uncomfortably close. "You don't know this, but I'm connected to the CEO. We're not even in the same league." Maybe it was the alcohol talking, but I couldn't make sense of what Tony was saying. "Whatever, just get your hands off me." When I brushed his hand away, Tony's face turned an even deeper shade of red. Like a demon, he furrowed his brow. "I'm important, you know." Tony, drunk as a skunk, couldn't even form a proper sentence. Just as I thought this was my chance to slip away, Tony grabbed a nearby chair and hurled it at me with all his might. The chair slammed into a table set up for conversation, sending food and drinks flying everywhere with a loud crash. If it had been just a few inches closer, I might have ended up in the hospital with serious injuries. The unexpected situation left me pale with fear, my body trembling. But Tony just smirked down at me, pointing and laughing loudly like something was hilarious. "Get lost, you idiot. Just having a loser like you around ruins the mood." Looking around, I saw that not only the nearby employees, but everyone in the room who had witnessed the commotion was pale and speechless. In the midst of this serious atmosphere, Tony's laughter echoed throughout the venue. Then my wife Emily, who had been standing a bit further away, came over. Angrier than I'd ever seen her, she confronted Tony. "Hey, who do you think you are? Clearly, you don't know who he is." Emily stood confidently, hands on her hips, glaring down at Tony. But Tony, not understanding the situation, leered at her from head to toe with a creepy grin. Emily, who's a famous model on TV and in magazines, is stunningly beautiful, with a slender figure that anyone would envy. Drunk and lecherous, Tony started moving toward her. "Hey, aren't you that famous model, Emily? Did you come as a guest for the party? Could you stop breathing your disgusting breath on me and stay away?" Emily's disgust was clear, but Tony, as usual, didn't listen and kept trying to touch her inappropriately. Then Emily's slap landed squarely on Tony's face with a satisfying smack, sending him crashing to the ground. "What the hell was that for? Do you even know who I am? I'm Tony Walker, with the same last name as the CEO. What are you even talking about? With the CEO backing me up, I can deal with a woman like you any way I want." Emily and I both looked at Tony, confused by his nonsensical rant. "Tony, what are you even saying? I don't know what you're trying to get at, but if you keep treating my husband like this, you'd better be ready to face the consequences." Tony's eyes widened in shock at Emily's words. "Husband. You're married to this loser." Tony couldn't believe it, his face twisted in confusion. Just then, a man in a luxury suit stepped between us with a puzzled expression. "What are you guys doing here?" "Paul, the CEO. There's someone here who shouldn't be. Get rid of this loser right now." Tony, who had been sitting on the floor, started babbling incoherently, his face drenched in sweat. But the CEO just frowned and then took my hand. "What are you doing here, Magnus? The new CEO. It's almost time for your inaugural speech. You need to be more composed." "Sorry, Dad. I was just dealing with a little issue." The man in the expensive suit standing before me was Paul Walker. He's my father and the current CEO of this major fast food chain. He's set to step down soon and take on the role of chairman, with me slated to become the new CEO. This year's big year-end party was also meant to be the event where my promotion to CEO would be officially announced. Being the CEO of a major fast food chain is a heavy burden for me, so whenever I have to speak in public, I plan to leave it to the vice president, whom my father trusts the most. But my father insisted that I attend this year's party to fulfill my responsibilities as the new CEO. Although I never expected it would turn into such a fiasco. As my father smiled and gripped my hand firmly, my wife Emily, who had been wearing a strange smile, stood up and brushed the dirt off my clothes. In this suddenly peaceful moment, I glanced over at Tony. He was shaking uncontrollably, his once red face now pale as a ghost. "What? You're the CEO. How? Why?" Tony, clearly rattled, stammered as he broke into a cold sweat, slowly scooting back on his rear like a villain from a comic book. As Tony tried to make his escape, Emily, her smile tight with irritation, spoke up. "By the way, you mentioned something earlier about being related to or knowing the CEO. But there's no way someone like you was part of the Walker family. What are you talking about?" Hearing the full story from Emily, my father's expression darkened as he glared at Tony like a demon. "What do you think you're doing? Claiming to be a part of the Walker group when you have no connection to our family. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." Terrified by the menacing glares from both my father and Emily, Tony's bravado crumbled, and he quickly dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead to the floor as he repeatedly apologized. I had transferred to Tony's department as part of my preparation to take over as CEO, and the results were more than I had expected. One of my hobbies is watching foreign TV shows and documentaries, and my favorite is a famous program where the CEO disguises themselves as a janitor or part-time worker to uncover hidden issues within the company. Officially, I was supposed to be handling international business. But behind the scenes, I was visiting various subsidiaries within the group to investigate their internal issues, finding numerous problems and areas for improvement. In short, I wanted to improve the company by playing a little game of undercover boss, inspired by my favorite show. What I discovered while working there was that struggling subsidiaries within the group always have room for improvement. This time, I had taken the opportunity to work under Tony, but the situation was far worse than I had imagined, and I got caught up in it myself. Tony's department was in a state far worse than any other. When I revealed that my transfer was actually part of a surprise investigation, Tony's face went from pale to ghostly white. "Tony, you understand what this means without me having to spell it out, right?" "What do you mean?" "I've been working diligently. I haven't done anything that bad, right?" Tony began making excuses, so selfish it was almost laughable. Eventually, he even tried to blame everything on his supposedly incompetent subordinates, leaving me utterly speechless. "I understand your perspective, Tony, but you should go home now." Desperate to escape the painful stares of everyone around him, Tony bolted for the exit. But in his haste, he tripped over his own feet and crashed into a table full of food. With dishes overturned and food covering his head, Tony's clumsy fall brought a wave of laughter from the other attendees. Soon after, the branch manager from Tony's subsidiary rushed over to me, sweating profusely as he repeatedly apologized. As I glanced toward where I felt a gaze, I saw Tony staring at me with a face twisted in fear. Noticing Tony's panic, the branch manager, still lowering his head, shot a sideways glare of resentment at Tony. Tony, who had collapsed in fear, was so terrified that he lost the strength in his legs. He mustered his last bit of strength and managed to leave, crawling away. The next day, I showed up to work as usual, acting like nothing had happened. Good morning. The employees in the department, as always, returned my greeting without much enthusiasm. However, to Tony, who had learned my true identity the day before, was so startled that he knocked the papers off his desk onto the floor and collapsed on the spot. Gee, good more, Tony stammered, looking as if he had just seen a ghost. The employees, puzzled by Tony's odd behavior, glanced over at him with curiosity. Tony, are you okay? I'm good. Good. Tony's face was pale, drenched in sweat, and he was trembling uncontrollably. His voice shook, and he was in such a panic that he couldn't even form a coherent sentence. But none of the employees who had suffered under Tony's tyranny over the years offered him any comfort. Instead, soft chuckles could be heard from various corners of the office as they watched him cower in fear. Suddenly, I noticed an unfamiliar envelope among the papers that Tony had dropped on the floor. When I checked the contents, I found that it was a resignation letter. Tony, what's this? That? Oh. Hearing murmurs of "not again" from the surrounding employees, my suspicions turned into certainty. It was a resignation letter from one of the employees who recently left. I had heard rumors, but it turned out that Tony had been forcing employees who couldn't tolerate his abuse to resign, and processing them as voluntary resignations. He even had the resignation documents mailed to him so that he could submit them himself. In doing so, he changed the payment details so that the severance pay was transferred to his own account. Tony, this is a serious problem. You shouldn't expect to continue working here after this. Even as I expressed my exasperation, Tony felt at his knees begging for forgiveness, but there was no way he could be pardoned so easily. After reporting Tony's misconduct to the branch manager, including the issue of the resigned employees, the branch manager turned pale and began shaking as well. Although I felt sorry for the branch manager, I had no choice but to accept his demotion and pay cut for allowing Tony's tyranny to go unchecked. Less than a week later, Tony was officially dismissed for gross misconduct. Additionally, Tony was ordered to return the severance pay to the employees and compensate the company for the damages he caused. Tony's dismissal revealed one of the long-standing mysteries. According to interviews with the employees, Tony had been claiming to be a relative of my family simply because we shared the same last name, even before he became a department head. While it's true that having the same last name by coincidence didn't change anything, I was unaware that it had been exploited in this way until now. My father, busy with his duties as CEO, likely hadn't noticed either. I also blame myself for not being more visible. As childish as it may seem, it was apparently effective enough to help Tony land his position as a department head, at least partly due to the surname connection. With the compensation he owed, Tony lost not only his severance pay, but also all his savings. Having lost not just his position as a department head, but his job altogether, Tony's wife filed for divorce. The divorce was finalized, and now Tony supposedly lives a modest life on his own. Since then, I hadn't heard much about Tony, until one day I was surprised to come across his name in an unexpected place. I received a report about an incident of dining and dashing at a store in a rural area. The culprit tried to flee immediately, but tripped over his own feet as he started running and was arrested on the spot. That culprit turned out to be Tony. The unfortunate incident involving Tony quickly became the talk of the company. The name Tony Walker, once a former department head, took on a life of its own and eventually became the subject of jokes everywhere. A few months later, after I was officially appointed as the new CEO, The first thing I focused on was making the company more transparent to prevent anything like Tony's situation from happening again. Despite everything that happened, Tony became a sort of cautionary tale, and in that sense, he indirectly helped the company. After revising the training manuals based on the issues I uncovered while visiting the various stores operated by our group subsidiaries, the company's performance began to improve steadily. We decided to implement the new manual in the newly opened stores. The manual worked well, but the employees were overwhelmed by the unexpected rush of customers. Even though I joined in to help, it was so busy that I could hardly keep up. But surprisingly, despite the large number of customers waiting outside, not a single complaint was filed. Curious about how smoothly everything was running inside, I went to check the situation outside. There, I found a middle-aged security guard engaging with the waiting customers. This guard was keeping both children and adults entertained, making the long wait enjoyable for them. When I approached the guard to express my gratitude, I was shocked to realize that it was Tony, looking a bit worn, but unmistakably him. "Oh, hello, Magnus. It's busy today, isn't it? Don't worry about outside. I've got it covered." Thanks to Tony, the grand opening day went off without a hitch. I wanted to thank him after we finished cleaning up, but he had already left and I couldn't find him anywhere. Throughout the entire grand opening campaign, Tony worked tirelessly as a security guard without taking a single day off. On the final day, when I finally managed to thank him, Tony, now a completely different person, talked with a humble attitude that I could hardly believe was the same man I once knew. "I'm truly sorry for the trouble I caused before. It may not make up for it, but I'm glad if I could help in some way." Tony had transformed so much that even I, who knew his past behavior, couldn't recognize him as the same person. Feeling genuinely happy, I couldn't help but smile in surprise. "Would it be possible for us to assign you as the security guard for the next new store we open?" Tony, looking embarrassed, smiled slightly and bowed deeply before leaving without saying a word. As I watched Tony's now confident figure walk away, an idea came to mind. I decided to incorporate Tony's hospitality, which I had witnessed firsthand, into the company's training manuals. I'm confident that Tony's efforts now, as a changed man, will bring smiles to many more customers in the future.